Welcome, geeks, to another exciting episode of Rockin the Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm glad you're back. It's been a month. I've missed you all. I hope you missed the show. It's been a crazy month for me personally, but and the weather in San Diego is freaking hot. So all of you in Phoenix and Vegas, don't talk to me, but it's too hot for San Diego right now, and it's not going to let up until like Wednesday. We've had a really hot August for some reason. I don't know why. I picked a bad time to donate my air conditioner to Goodwill. And last week I tore ligaments in my left hand, so I'm kind of bummed because I can't play guitar for I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 weeks. It really sucks. So, but I've been keeping busy, been writing, been doing other stuff, and I'm really super excited about this show. I've been working on this show for many months and been wanting to do this show for even longer. And so I'm so glad that I've been able to assemble a great panel of experts with the Billy, David, Dustin, Jared, and Shawn will all introduce themselves very quick in a few minutes, and they will get into the panel show. So I wanted to do a panel show on to help developers prepare for being in this career for a long time. And just because I didn't get much advice. I'll talk about that in a second. So anyway, I've been able to gather not only a group of people that I respect, but a group of people from different generations, different ways they've gone through their tech career, like from big companies to consulting companies to even one person even owns his own company. So I wanted to get a big variety of different opinions for you younger developer, for any developer really, but really targeted to the younger developers so you can prepare for being in this career 20 plus years. Because, you know, when I started, I didn't think I'd be here this long, to tell you the truth. But here I am. Uh, so let me go over a little bit about, you know, why I've been wanting to do this show for a while. And on Sunday, I released an article of my 6 top tips minus the number one tip I'll give at the end of the show. So if you're watching, before I forget, make sure you start putting in your questions now so we can get the panel to answer them. And also the panel, we're all going to be holding our number one tip until the very end of the show and to leave the show off with a bang, especially since this is the last show of season 4 for the show. So on Sunday, I put out an article, Surviving and Thriving in Tech, and it has my, well, 5 of the tips. I'll add my number one tip after the show today. About, you know, and some of the tips I've been talking about for a long time. Some tips are new in that article. But as I've looked back on my career, which has been 30 years now, I've been in full-time software engineer, you know, and, you know, quite frankly, the challenges I've been experiencing on finding a new position, and whether, you know, that's I'm experiencing ageism or people don't want to pay for my experience, whatever it is, we'll get into that during the show. It's been a really difficult year, and so it's been important for me to do this show not only for myself because I need help, but also to prepare the younger developers, including, you know, the younger developers I know and even mentor, for being in this career 20, 30 years. And so I hope you all get something out of it. But like I say all the time, you know, you'll get more out of this show if you're watching live and you start putting in questions now. There are no dumb questions. Just put them in and we'll get them answered as soon as we can. So, like I said, I've been reflecting back on my career this summer. And recently I also saw a tweet about, you know, asking, you know, what advice would an older experienced developer give younger developers? And so that really got my brain thinking about, you know, what advice can I give or, you know, help other people maybe not have such a hard time as I'm having right now, you know, because for everybody that follows me, you probably already know that, you know, I've accomplished quite a bit in my career. I would say, I've worked at a wide variety of companies throughout my career. Full time, contracting, part time, things like that. I founded the year I became a full-time software engineer. I founded a user group here in San Diego, and ran it for most of the 20 years it was in existence. I retired in 2014. Yeah, 2014. So 10 years ago, I retired from that group. I've authored more books that I can come up with on top of my head since '97. I've maintained a popular blog since '94, and a little bit of trivia with that. My very, very first blog site for software engineers was actually piggybacked off of Carl Franklin's website back in '94. So thank you again, Carl, for supporting me all these years and being such a good friend. I taught at the University of California, San Diego for 18 years, and so I spent a lot of time teaching and advising the younger people and adults too. This year I got my 18th Microsoft MVP award. I'm very, very proud of. I got my very first one in 2006. Actually, a couple days ago, I tweeted out a picture of the certificate they used to give us back then. I found it as I was cleaning stuff out. I've traveled the world. I've been speaking for 30 years. I've been speaking, the very first year I was a software engineer. And, and I've written many articles of just how much speaking has really, really improved my personal and professional career. And now, that speaking allows me to travel the country and travel the country and travel the world. Getting to know other developers in different countries, which is one of my favorite things to do, is to not only help people, by speaking, but also going to different places and seeing how, they approach software engineering in those different countries or even different cities in America. It's different everywhere you go. And so I've always been really, curious about that. Also, I worked at a .com company back in the internet bubble days, and my work there, I became a patent inventor. So I'm cool. I didn't make any money, but at least I can put that in my title. I've hosted this show for 4 seasons now, and we average about 250,000 views a year. And a lot more. I can keep going. It's when people ask me these things in job interviews, it's hard for me to not take a lot of time because I've done a lot in this career, and I hope you want to do a lot in your career, especially if you're starting out. And so this is what this show is all about. And so I've gained a wealth of knowledge during all these years, and I kind of want to share that along with my guests on the show. When I started software engineering, I still remember the reason I live where I do is one of my first software engineering jobs. It's just right up the street from me, a walking distance. And I remember sitting there one day and I was looking through our local computer magazine when we had one. And the only advice I got when I was a beginner, or pretty much my entire career really, was I was going through the magazine and I saw this article about salary. It was a salary survey. And I noticed on there that, developers, once they turn about 50 years old, their salary really takes a nosedive. And I looked at that and said, that's not happening to me. And so maybe that's why I decided to write so much and speak so much and do everything I do. Because I wanted to, stay to make this a career, but I didn't want my salary to go down either, especially with inflation and everything else. And I live in California, which is crazy expensive to live here. So I really had no guidance when I started, and unfortunately, I have to be honest in this show, and I didn't prepare correctly, and that's why I'm having a hard time at this stage of my career. I can definitely say the first 15 years of my career was much easier than my last 15. I don't know about the other people in my panel, but that's the way it's been for me. And so I want to prepare the younger developers, or any developer really, but especially the younger ones, to start preparing now. If you really love software engineering, you really love being in the tech world, you need to prepare. I know we don't think about things like that. You know, we get caught up with, you know, family and life and all those things. But I'm here to tell you, you have to make a plan and stick with it, or you know, you're going to be having a harder time like I am right now. So that's really the goal of this show, is to prepare the next generation of software engineers. And I have different generations of software engineers on this show. So please, please, please take it, before I introduce them, please take advantage of this wealth of knowledge that's on this show, and ask questions, or, you know, if you watch this video and you like it, please send it to any developer you know to help them too. And you know, I thought about writing a book about this, but books don't really sell much, so I don't know if I'm going to do that. But I'd like to, because that's kind of my fallback position most of the time. All right. With that said, I hope I explained why I wanted to do this show. And like I said, I've been excited and really, really been looking forward to this show for many, many, many months. And so I'm so glad the day is here and we get to do the show today. So again, make sure you ask questions. It's very important. So I want to have each each person on the panel introduce themselves. So my longtime friend, maybe the person I've known the longest on this panel, is Billy Hollis.
Oh, hey there, David. So, you know, I don't like talking about myself. I really don't. So I'll give the brief version. I started out as a developer, learned to write code in 1973 on punch cards. I started doing it for money in 1978. Went through the PC era when we all had to figure out how to do things ourselves. So did what we would today call architecture, overall system design, did a fair amount of that, and transitioned in the last 15 years to more work in the design space, design thinking and UX design. I actually cared a lot about that too back in the 80s and 90s. I think I was one of the first mouse-driven PC developers in Nashville because I felt like that was something that the users were going to like.
Yeah.
So I've transitioned more to design, but I still do coding and such because now people care about design, and they
Right.
didn't care about it before. I've done, you know, lots of books, and I speak a lot, and some of my books include the earliest books on .NET. But you know, it's an interesting thing that the very first book I wrote was titled, it was back in the VB6 era now, was titled Design, Specification, and Objects in VB6, which even though it was a technical book, at that time I was already sort of in that space of trying to apply design to get better software.
Yeah. And you know, I've always looked up to your advice on user experience design. You know, I think you're one of the best voices in that area. And I've always, you know, for me personally, I've always valued your honest, direct opinions about user interface design and things like that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and certainly I've thought about it more and longer, I think, than most people in the space. So that gives me some insight. Plus, I actually did a lot of science as a young adult. I went to medical school for a year before deciding not to be a doctor, which a lot of people don't know about me. And it turns out that a lot of that science of how the brain works and how the eyes work is very, very relevant to design. So I tend to see things that maybe other people without that background don't see.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you for being on the show. I can't wait to get the panel, everybody, and we can start sharing advice. So the next person is David Neal.
Well, hey.
How's it going?
Great. Glad to be here. And first of all, I read Billy Hollis's book on VB6 back in the day on design patterns. And when Billy was at Oakwood, I remember really digging that book. It helped me. I was a little bit younger in my career at that point. So I started in the early 90s and was, jumped on when the internet started to take off, and I've pretty much focused on building web applications since the mid 90s. And so, let's see. Yeah, my journey started with BASIC and Pascal back in the day, and did a lot of what we now refer to as classic ASP, and then doing a lot of VB6, or starting with VB2 and 3. I think built a lot of applications, and yeah, spent a lot of time in the .NET world, C#, SQL Server, ASP.NET, and then about 10 years ago, kind of jumped from more into open source and started to use Node.js and more JavaScript, for better or worse, because that is the internet, right?
Yep.
So why not embrace it and all of its quirks? So I've been an advocate for software developers for a long time. I've been involved in the community. I have helped run meetup in Nashville, where I used to live. And I spent a lot of time going to conferences and meetups and meeting other software developers, because my mission in life in this stage of my career for the last 10 years has been pretty much to help other folks in technology be more awesome.
Yeah.
That's usually how I phrase it. But I'm wanting to give back. And yeah, and for me personally, this past year and a half has been pretty challenging, the most challenging time in my career.
Yeah, me too. I started with VB2, and you're also a really, really good illustrator too, and have your own
Thank
book
you.
on illustrations, right?
I have written a book too, but it's
Yeah.
it was not the book that I expected to write. It's an illustrated book of dad jokes.
Yeah.
But I've contributed to other books too, and technical reviews and things like that. But yeah, I started as a hobby, started doing illustration work 6 or 7 years ago, and used it as my presentations and everything, and just fell in love with it. And now I do almost as much illustration work as I do programming.
Yeah, that's cool. I love doing that stuff. You did a drawing of me that I use there. I changed my Twitter profile to every once in a while. So if you see a cartoonish drawing of me, that's David's drawing. Okay, next is Jared Parsons from Microsoft. Jared, is Jared there?
There we go.
Oh, there he is.
There we go. Hey, I'm Jared Parsons. I work on the C# compiler team at Microsoft. And in terms of been in career, I recently celebrated my 20th year at Microsoft. Kind of coming up in the industry, I was actually in college. I was a very big kind of Java person, and I spent a ton of time like writing and using Java in my classes and teaching it at school. And I got this kind of undergrad research job with the professor, and she's like, "Hey, you're going to learn this new thing. It's called C#, and you're going to be doing that as part of your research project." I'm like, "Okay." And then a couple years later, I interned at Microsoft. Then I ended up joining Microsoft, and about a year or two into my career at Microsoft, I moved on to the VB compiler team. And pretty much since then, I've been in the .NET space in one form or the other. I've worked on the VB compiler, the VB IDE, where I met Dustin, who we're going to chat with in a bit here. Spent about 5-6 years working in kind of more of a research capacity on system C#, trying to take C# and apply it to, like, can you write an operating system with it? And I've been about almost 10 years ago, rejoined the .NET team proper, and I've been working on .NET as we moved to .NET Core and started taking .NET from this Windows kind of environment to this more Xcopy deployable thing that you can put on Linux, Mac, and Windows. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And you've been on the show a few times, and
Yeah.
I really like you being on the show. You know so much about you. You're the most knowledgeable person about the compiler that I know, at least. And And I've always really liked you being on the show and sharing your experience and things.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed coming and talking about it.
And so the first time on the show is Dustin Campbell.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for bringing me here.
How's it going?
It's going really well. In fact, it's kind of funny, right? Because Jared, mentioned that, like, yeah, we met, when I joined Microsoft. As a programmer, I would say I started by getting in trouble in high school writing basic programs in class when I shouldn't have been on loose leaf notebook paper because, as a kid, my brain just works that systems fascinated me. So I've remarked that, like, in whatever language class I was taking, didn't matter if it was English or something else, I would get in big trouble. Not paying any attention. I got straight D's in Spanish, writing guitar scales. And so I had kind of these two, kind of dueling things in my brain. I really loved playing guitar, and I was, a hotshot rock guitarist, 17 years old in, the early 90s, late 80s. Yeah. And then I also was kind of learning this programming thing. I was fascinated by, Z80 assembler. I was fascinated by whatever I could. I was just fascinated by just the logic of that stuff. And so I actually went on to study jazz guitar. I have a jazz guitar performance degree, which has done a lot for me, I guess. That was sarcastic. I'm not playing jazz guitar as much as my degree would have had me do. But that helped me learn to learn. Even more, right? Yeah. And so I wound up, kind of getting fascinated by things that helped me write code, right? Like productivity stuff, things that just made me go faster. I wound up at the as a Delphi programmer at the time. I wrote Visual Basic and starting in VB5 and then in VB6, and then I moved on to Delphi and wound up at the worst name conference that's ever existed, the Borland conference, which was called BorCon, in 2001. Yeah. And wound up working on meeting, a guy there who some of you guys probably know, Mark Miller, right? Ended up working with him on productivity tools. And I decided that's what I really wanted to do. And there's always kind of been a space for me carved out in IDE work, compiler work, whatever. And so I worked there. I worked on those tools for a while, Code Rush. I worked closely with Microsoft as a partner, and then joined Microsoft in 2008. It's been 16 years now.
Wow.
I remember I joined as a program manager, and I was, I didn't know what I was doing. But I was introduced to the current acting developer lead on the VB IDE, Jared Parsons, and we became friends, right? And so yeah, it's kind of weird. I'm like, oh, that's nice. I'm glad Jared's on this. So like that was, and now over the years, I've continued to work on just productivity tools, compilers. I was there when we kicked off the Roslyn project, and worked on the IDE tooling for that and helped design that. I helped build the original C# for Visual Studio Code extension. I've done all those kinds of things. And then nowadays I get to continue working with Jared, and we're working on a number of things together. Right now I'm focused on trying to make Razor development really great. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. And last but not least is Shawn Wildermuth. I knew I was going to pronounce that wrong.
Either way.
Sorry about this, Shawn.
When people ask me how to pronounce my last name, I say Shawn. Yeah. It's just easier. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm a bit humbled by the cast of characters that you've thrown me in with. I have... this is my 34th year doing software development. So I'm very much in David's camp of kind of figuring it out. But, through the years, I guess I so want to get into the advice, and I'm going to try to preempt that by just telling you sort of my career. I dropped out of high school to start programming S100 systems, which CPM and NPM back in the day. That was after I'd got my VIC-20 and then eventually a Commodore 64, where I learned BASIC and how to copy games. I also learned a lot about copying games from my friends back then. And, I didn't have a good plan. So I spent probably the first many years going from sort of job to job. It looked like I had been a contractor the first 15 years of my career, because once I got bored at a company, I would move on to try to find something more interesting. I get bored very easily, and that doesn't make for a great employee, frankly. Just my experience with it. My career has really come in chapters of about 15 years. First 15, I was sort of, I had specialized in learning the language that no one else in the world was using, figuring out how to do forms over data in it, and then moving on to something else. So I've got a lot of esoteric languages like visual objects, if anyone remembers that. And I did a lot of Clipper back in the day, and put myself in Delphi, whatever the right pronunciation is, Dustin. I don't know anymore. And then I got into C# for a long time. I was doing C# on Windows 3.1, just sort of set the scale, the period I was doing it, and became enamored with .NET right after 9/11, frankly. It became sort of an obsession of mine to keep my mind away from the other things that were happening. And I've been an MVP since 2002. And I'm not sure why they keep on giving it to me, but I keep on doing it. What I realized, from my early career to my late career, that what I was good at was figuring out and investigating hard things and being able to explain it to people. And so I sort of backed myself into a career where I've done most of the last 15 years has been training. I have a bunch of courses on Pluralsight. I do private training, YouTube channel, all the things that you would expect for someone who likes teaching. So without that college degree, they never asked me to teach at the college. So
yeah,
it's certainly one of those. I'm proud of a lot of the things, the books I've written. None of them ever sold well enough, but they helped me really understand how certain technologies work. It forced me to look deeper. And I've been mostly a specialist in forms over data backends. My first real name that I had for my original blog was the ADO guy, not the ADO.net guy, but the ADO guy. And I've maintained that blog since then. I think that's 25 years old, 22 years old, something like that. So, I think that's enough about me. But what about me?
It's all about me, right? Well, again, thanks everybody for being on the show. If you could mute your mic if you're typing, that might help out a little bit. I know Simon's been saying something about it. But ADO, Azure DevOps, yeah. I was going to say, well, I'm going to say it now. Visual InterDev.
Oh yeah, version 2 to 6, right?
Yeah. That was our first, ASP.NET IDE, and we all curse it, but it was the first one. So it's just like Visual Source Save was cursed, but it was the first one we had. So we moved on to bigger and better things, and we have all moved on to different things in our careers, and that's why, like I said, I invited you all on to be this different paths in this career, different struggles, things like that. So to help other people. So with that said, does anybody, like I said, if you have a number one tip, we're going to do that at the end. But if you have anything you want to kind of start out with, floor is open to anybody who wants to start.
I wouldn't mind just going ahead and laying out the obvious, that if you want to go far in a career in tech, you've got to really enjoy learning.
Yes.
and no, it seems like every year that it becomes more and more important that things are changing so fast. If you don't love to learn and love to dig in and go deep on technologies and figure things out and problem solve and all that kind of stuff, then it may not be the right career for you. But it's the reason why I got into it in the first place, and the reason that keeps me learning or doing more and more is because I love to learn, and there's a never-ending supply of things to learn.
Yeah, well, the number 6 tip, and the very first tip, which is the number 6 tip in my article, is that, right? And it's something I didn't really realize in the beginning, but I really loved once I learned it. I mean, once I found it out, because, like I said in the article, it's just like being a musician. You can't learn everything, right? And that quest of always having something to learn is what gets me up in the morning, right?
But let me piggyback on that with something that's not necessarily obvious to some younger developers. This pace of having to keep learning things and the accelerating complexity and constant change in the industry is a strain.
It is.
And there are people, let's say the majority of the people I started out working with, I saw them fade out of tech and development careers, usually in their late 40s or early 50s, that the pace of change and the need to constantly keep up with things just became too much for them to bear. The stress of it was just too much. And so if you're at a young state, you may be at that state where you're knocking out 10 hours of coding a day or whatever right now. You need to prepare for the time when that will not be the case, when you won't be able to do it. I can't do 5 or 6 hours of coding a day is all I can do now. And that's one of the reasons I don't do as much. So one of the ways that you deal with that is to make sure that it isn't just code and technology that you know how to do. I know we're going to talk later about, and I think one of your points in the article was about soft skills, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that. That the way I think about it is you want to have kind of what some people call a talent stack. You don't want to just be great at one thing. You want to be really good at several things. And that gives you more latitude, more flexibility as you reach that point. Call it kind of the middle-aged crisis of developers or something, that when you reach that point where you're having trouble going on with stress, that you have various kinds of directions that you can shift your focus and your time and various ways to make yourself valuable to software development efforts.
I think I'd like to follow on with something real quick, and that is this idea of needing to learn constantly is absolutely true. Like, I'm on board with it completely. But there is a segment of our community that probably, I think it gets skewed because of the kind of people that are on places like this, or people that have YouTube channels, or that run user groups. There's a ton of developers out there who are really good at the one thing that they do, the language they first learned or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. They can have long-standing careers. I used to joke that if you want to make money in this industry, you should become a mumps programmer, which is every hospital used to use mumps. And some of them, a lot of them still do, because there's only like 100 guys that really know that, and they're dying off, right? So I think that if learning isn't your forte, you will still need to learn. Of course, you're going to need to learn, but don't be too afraid that you have to keep up with every new technology that comes out. Old code is good code is what I was told early in my career. And
as long as it works, right?
Yeah.
Well, I had a really quick. I just want to interject. I had a professor talk about this in his class. It was a class on system design and analysis, the best class I ever took, and he termed it techno stress. And when I write about it or talk about it in class or whatever, I always tell people I have like 110% of that. It causes a lot of stress in me and worry, and that's been difficult to deal with in my career. And I'm sure all of you too. But Dustin?
Yeah, what I was going to just kind of point out the meta point of the learning thing, but I will address what you were discussing, which you kind of led me to. But just the meta point of that learning, and there's going to be a lot of crossover amongst these tips, right? Learning isn't just about technology.
Right.
Learning isn't just about, but definitely specifically the learning technology thing, it's hard, and you want to have it's not just about comfort. That's part of it. You're all kind of tempted to stay where we're comfortable, and say, well, I'm good at this. I know how to solve problems in this framework or on this platform or with this language, right? But being able to put yourself out of your comfort zone is how, you actually learn.
Right.
I don't learn programming by reading books. I don't learn them by reading blog posts. I learn them by building something, right? And so having to go and put myself in a place where I need to go and learn that new next thing for me. And I might be learning the next thing. It's just my next thing. It's actually everybody else knows it. I just haven't done it yet. When I joined Microsoft in 2008, the dirty secret there was, and this was the new hotness of the time, right? This was kind of the big deal for UI frameworks, was nobody at Microsoft seemed to know WPF at all. But all of our companies do it. Okay, at that
They still
time.
don't.
Yeah, and I know it's so deep, right? It's like, well, how much could you possibly know? But I put myself in that, what's my personal project? I need to go and build something that puts me deeply in that so that I can understand what the hell is going on, right? And talk cogently about it. And so to this day, personal projects, that's usually a red flag for me if you don't have any when we go to
Right, me too.
Right.
Definitely, me too.
For the same reason.
And to piggyback off of some really quick, what you said is, you said this, but you have to find ways of challenging yourself. And so one of the ways I've always challenged myself, at least when I was at the university, was I would actually pick classes to teach I really didn't know a lot about, right? Because I wanted to learn about that technology. And my feeling is, well, if people are paying, whatever much money they pay for those classes, I better at least be able to talk about it, right? And so I would spend at least 40 hours a week preparing for the first, every day, the first couple times I taught that at the university. And that pushed me into doing uncomfortable things and learning things that, that I wanted to learn, but needed a way to do it, right?
I was take slightly different directions.
Jared, you're
you got robot mic.
I got
you have a robot mic.
Is that better?
No.
Robot mic.
It may be your throat.
It might be your throat.
Sorry, buddy.
Can you please say all your bases belong to us?
What is going on with the mic then? All right, let's see if I can figure this out. Let's see if I can switch to one.
Maybe maybe Simon has an idea. Maybe you need to jump off and back on again or something.
Yeah.
Anybody else have something to say while Jared's coming back?
I do. It took me a long time to figure out the phases of learning, because I used to just think I'm stupid that I don't get this right away. And so I've talked about it as when I start learning something, I start with the phase of they're stupid, right? Why would they possibly do it this way? And then I get into I'm stupid. Why didn't I see this? And then you finally sort of reach a peak of just this and then it goes off. But knowing that you have to be in those other phases of it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be, that you're not dumb because it's hard at first. A lot of this stuff is difficult, and persevering through that instead of just beating yourself up.
Yes.
And, one thing that I've noticed with software engineers, because I have this too, that I didn't know about for most of my career really is imposter syndrome, which really, kind of holds you back from a lot of this, right? And so that's another thing a lot of us need to deal with is those kind of learning, it gets in the way of learning, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Jared, you want to see if you're better?
All right, is this better or not?
Oh yeah,
it is great.
Oh, woo!
Don't mute your mic anymore.
Yeah, nothing again. You guys are going to hear all my typing. The one thing I was going to say is particularly when you talk about growing your career, and it's kind of a wall I hit, kind of going from more of a junior developer to a senior developer, was actually like the ability to communicate my ideas and write. And in big groups. Like I was someone particularly early in career, like you give me, like I enjoyed the learning, I enjoyed the grind, I enjoyed just kind of like, give me a hard problem. I don't necessarily know that area, but I'll go figure it out. Like I can do this. And I was very good at producing code. I was very good at producing good code and like showing people how to do better testing, things like that. But I was definitely not, once I kind of wanted to go to more of a senior level, I was kind of hitting a wall because I just I was not a good writer. Like if I really quickly noticed, I was getting frustrated with my career. Like, why is that person having success in the type of area I want to be successful in? And then I started noticing, like, looking more at like the emails they wrote, the documents they wrote, like what kind of reactions are they getting to their documents and their emails that compared to what I am getting. And at some point I realized kind of like I was very good one-on-one with people. Like you put me in a room with someone one-on-one, I can get my idea across. I can get you on board with my idea. You put me in a room with like 10 people, I was not as good of a communicator. Yeah. Email, terrible. I just was not, I was not as effective as a writer as I needed to be. And so one of the reasons I started a blog about 15 years ago, and I started spending a lot more time participating on sites like Stack Overflow when it was kind of starting up, was I realized like these are ways, particularly Stack Overflow, I'm gonna learn really fast, to be a better writer and a more effective writer. And I will get points-based feedback on how good I am doing. And it took me a couple of years to get to a point where my writing was legible by most people. But it is something particularly now as we've shifted from in like Microsoft, a world where everyone is in the office and I'm able to talk to people and use my hands. I'm a good hands talker, to a point where so much of our communication is asynchronous and writing and email and Teams. Like the writing skills are more and more important. And it's something I kind of like, I just didn't care about when I was in school. I was like, yeah, whatever. I passed.
I didn't either. Yeah.
I passed English. I'm good. Yeah. I don't like, I got through that. I can focus on my computer.
I got a C. I'm happy.
Yeah. I got through that. And I definitely think that people, I have found a number of other junior devs who've really undervalued that same skill and have had to take them aside and be like, you really have to get better at that because your technical skills will take you this far, but you will hit a wall if you can't be a good communicator.
Right.
Jared, are you familiar with the 1,000,000-word hypothesis?
No, I am not familiar with that.
People this came out of people who do writing as a profession, that training your brain to be effective at writing requires you to write about 1,000,000 words.
That's
and that if it almost doesn't matter what you write. You're just training that part of your brain. And a typical blog post is probably a couple thousand words. So that kind of gives you some scale about what it takes. You said a couple of years. I'm guessing during that couple of years, you probably wrote hundreds of thousands of words. You might have been closing in on that 1,000,000-word mark. But for those of you who out there kind of starting that journey, don't expect results too fast. It takes some time to train up that portion of your brain.
Yeah.
And one of the rewarding ones, if you do like a blog post or something, is like go back and read the things you wrote 6 months ago.
Yeah.
If you cringe, you cringe, you're making progress.
Yeah.
It's true.
I've gone back on my blog, especially because I really utilize ChatGPT to help me edit my books and everything now. I've gone back on my blog to some of my favorite articles I've written a long time ago and redid them, right? With not only the knowledge I have, but also with, ChatGPT assisting me with editing. But I've done that, because 10 years ago, I was worse than I am now, I think.
One thing about the 1,000,000 words, though, it can't be the same word.
Well,
Please don't write the same word.
No, you have to put thought in between the words. Yes.
Excel is not a database. Excel is not a database. You can't do that, Amelia.
Yeah.
People of my era, I think, are a little different than that. I got into this because I thought it wasn't about people, and I was wholly wrong. Sitting down and developing for 6 to 10 hours a day is fine, but that's not the job. The job is to collaborate, work through designs together as a group, and I really wanted it to be, you put pizza under the door and code comes out, sort of programmer, and that just that was a shock to me.
That your career is going to suffer if you do that.
It will.
Because two of the most talented people I ever worked with, both worked with very early in my career. In terms of writing code, they were extraordinary, but they had that mindset of people like this. They're awful at design. Sometimes they're great at coding. Which, if they think something should be a certain way, they don't understand why other people should think it should be any different. Those people don't generally get along with people. People get the impression that they don't care about them.
Yeah.
You need to give the impression that you care about the people you're writing stuff for, because those are going to be a key source of the opportunities that you're going to have at various points in your career. If you just do the job and you just knock out the code, and it can be spectacularly technically great, nevertheless, if you don't accomplish the objective of having them see that you care about their problem, that you wanted to solve their problem, you wanted to help them. If that's what they walk away with, not just that you can write good code, but that you care about their problem, their ability to assist you in your career going forward is dramatically greater. Because if you don't get that across to them, then they're never going to think about you again, no matter how good a job you did.
Yeah, true.
Very true.
Yeah, written, verbal, visual communication is so important in this, and I think you've all, most of you alluded to this, is like Shawn said, is a lot of us don't want to do any of that. We just want to code, right? That's what we love to do, but that's not going to get you going, moving up the career ladder if you don't find a way to communicate to not only your team but others in your company too.
Yeah, I'll, if I can jump on that. I'm sorry, Shawn. No. This is how this is going to be without a hand raise feature. But what I at Microsoft, and I can only really speak for that as far as career advancement, and I can't really speak for consulting and that kind of thing, but maybe there is an analog here. But there's a particular career level where you're compensated and all that. That's pretty much as good as you're ever going to get at coding, and that's how that's seen. It's like, well, if you've hit this level of senior, we're not expecting you to be you're expected to be the top notch at that point. So going above that is everything else. It requires you're going to, as you get, and that's later in career stuff, is you're going to grow scope. Right, you're going to be working on more things. You're going to be working with more people, more teams. You're going to be needing to build not just soft skills, but that's very much part of those interpersonal skills, but also the leadership skills, being able to actually lead and say and bring in all the opinions and come up with a conclusion and drive consensus and all those sorts of things that sound terrifying to an introvert who wants to sit coding all day. But that's what it where you go. That's what it means.
And one of the results that comes out of that tendency you talk about there, and the tendency of developers to want to be focusing on this thing, is that our industry has a horrible shortage of what I guess we could call facilitators, people who do know how to lead a group through, work through any of the conflicts between members of the group, get to decisions, good decisions in an expeditious way. I end up going into clients a lot who just call me every couple of years and say, would you come and help us work through this? Because we're talking about, in some cases, billion-dollar companies don't have anybody that's good at that. Think about that. You're talking about staffs of 200 and 300 people in these companies, and not one of them is able to lead a group through an effective decision-making process. And so if that terrifies you and you don't want to do it, okay. But if you feel like that's something you're able to do, well, that will add a lot of value to your career.
Yeah. And that's, quite frankly, in the past 10 years or more, I've been trying to search for jobs exactly what you just explained. how can I use my 20, 30 years of knowledge to help people's development projects, not coding, but doing exactly what you just said. And my experience is finding jobs like that is near impossible, for a wide variety of reasons. But I kind of want to move topics a little bit, because this is one thing I really want to talk about before we run out of time, and especially since I have some older developers on here, is and this is one of the questions on the show notes, how have you all navigated the challenges of ageism in this career, which is something I've hit a wall with right now, and so I kind of wanted to see what other people think about that.
I've been running into that. The end of one of my 15-year cycles started a couple of years ago, and I've been sort of searching on what I want to do next, whether that's continuing the consulting company that I've had since 2007, or figuring out new ways to teach, because I spent a lot of time in sort of the teaching realm, and dipping my toe back into sending resumes out and seeing how that works, and has been really a challenge, because I don't think it's just ageism, but something that David, you mentioned early on, and that is ageism plus the sort of salary changes. Bill, was it Billy that mentioned at 50 everyone loses their mind? I think that's really, really true. My advice around that is that I don't know how to fix the ageism problem, but I do know that you should plan for it. So what I mean by that is, if you're making a lot of money right now, please don't get into credit card debt and buy new cars every year, because when it runs out, you want to be on a solid footing.
Yes.
We want to talk about, saving for retirement and all that, but just the logistics of when you have a down cycle, if you're servicing a lot of debt, your stress is going to be way higher. Just way higher.
Yes.
And so I did that back in 2000. I thought everything was great, and I borrowed through the hilt because I thought it was never going to end. And the .NET bubble plus 9/11, it ended. It ended. And so, living on a cash basis has been really important to me. And I think that takes the pressure over having to take a job that you don't want as well, which can hurt your career.
Yeah, definitely can.
Shawn, tying that to something that we were talking about earlier, that stress, and I've been there too. Like before Microsoft, I came saddled with I'll throw a number. I was saddled with $70K in credit card debt when I joined Microsoft. And that stress from that makes it harder to deal with that techno stress, right? If you're not clearing the deck for stress so that you can go and then do the, deal with the stress that helps you grow, where you're dealing with the stress that you're just trying to get out your head above water. It's misery.
Yeah, I got out of debt about 20 years ago, and I cannot think of a more freeing, more effective way to manage the rest of your career than to not have to, have that kind of stuff looming over your head. I do want to say on the subject of ageism, I don't know the answer, but I will say that I think if there's any glimmer of hope, it's the connections that we've made in our career, and how important it is that, to use the terrible term, to have a network, but to know people in the industry, to know people who are also influential, who are in positions of, of influence, right, or power. And in the last year and a half that I've been active seeking employment more than I have in my entire career, sending resumes, cold type things, I have not gotten one interview.
Yeah, I haven't had an interview in a long time. Yeah.
So the only interviews that I've had are with folks that I had a connection prior, that I had a personal connection with, who knew me or knew my reputation, who knew, the kind of work that I'm capable of doing, that gave me the opportunity to have those conversations and to, have an interview with a potential employer. So I cannot stress enough. This would be my number one tip, that you get involved in your community and you find ways that you can make yourself known in the technology that you work with and the types of areas that you want to invest in.
Yeah, I would not be where I am if I didn't get involved in community, flat out. And I've written about this, it's in my article, but flat out, that really, really changed where my career was going, was getting involved in community. Yeah.
I think that building, again, the bad word network is important. I think that as you do it, something to just be aware of is that you being kind to people will absolutely remember. And that means not coming across as arrogant or looking down at junior devs or anything, because you don't know where these people will be. And if you don't have it in you, which some people don't, to just be kind and not trying to prove their intellect every time they open their mouth, there's a pragmatic reason for being kind anyway. I've met so many people and that have come up to me years later and told me that I was nice to them and they looked up to that, and that's important. I've had a couple people say the opposite. Don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
I think just having compassion for people that are trying to learn this, especially when you're sort of in 30s, 40s, and 50s, when you have enough experience behind you, they're not your competition. They're your community.
Right.
Yeah, Shawn, I was actually going to bring that up too, that it's not just about building out a network like horizontally, like, we all know each other, but building it up, help combat ageism a little bit. It's hard, right? There's biases and stigmas, and it's really difficult. And I'm sorry, guys. I hate hearing that. But having that network that's a little deeper, age-wise, mentoring people that are younger in career, but also not just being more than nice, like being an ally to help them in their career, right? Advocating for them when, they're doing great stuff and making sure that's seen. And again, it depends on the environment you're working on in how much, how much impact that has, but it can go a long ways towards making that network more than just kind of a LinkedIn graph and real people stuff, which, as we said, that's what turns out this is about.
Yeah, I definitely think like all of us, like when especially you're growing up in a big company, like at some point you had someone that worked with you and who was your mentor and helped you go through things. And I think you really, as you get up in your career, you have to ask yourself, who is looking at me the way I looked at that person? Like, who thinks of me as the person that helped them get over those humps and help them kind of like advance and learn? And I think there's, kind of two roles you take with that. Some people turn into managers or lead roles, and then that's a very natural place where you can have that. But if you're not that, you're not a lead, you're still like an individual contributor, like you can and probably should like figure out like who is that junior person or persons that I am helping, who do I want to look up to me the way I look up to that person who helped me get through the ranks.
Yeah, and one thing, because I want to move on to our one question here in a second, but one thing is those younger developers or more shy people, don't be afraid to ask somebody, right? And because nothing's going to happen unless you ask, right? And so if there's somebody you look up to, like a Billy Hollis, reach out to him. I mean, you might get rejected, but you're not. Yeah. You're always going to be rejected if you don't try, right? And so you've got to get out of your comfort zone and actually reach out, because there's many of us, I would say everybody on this call that are more than willing to help people, right? But you have to be the one to ask for it, right? So
I just want to say it's not weird to be hesitant to reach out to like someone that. I'm 20 years into my career. The other day I was like arguing with someone on Teams, and it took me, and I don't know why, 20 years to still have this problem. And me just like messaging them privately, like, hey, let's just get on a call real quick, man. Like, let's just we're just something's wrong here. Let's just get on a call and talk to each other. 20 years in, I still have like social hesitation in that. So it's not weird to feel that way.
No. Yeah.
But the number of times I've reached out with someone and said, hey, I want to talk. Hey, I want to learn more. Hey, let's grab some coffee. Like the number of times that has been a successful thing versus non-successful is like mountains. Like it is just orders of magnitude.
Well, one thing, I want to say that Simon has said to me many, many times, he goes, Dave, how do you get all these awesome guests? Right? And my answer is, I ask. That's the secret.
You can't say yes if you don't ask.
Exactly.
And you've been nice.
So the question we have, which is interesting, is what do we all think about project manager? Should it be a technical or managerial? What do you guys all think?
I would say it can be both. I think you can be there are different styles of management, and they can both be very successful. I have worked with managers who are purely like, I'm a people manager, I just facilitate this way, and they're very successful. I tend to be one who's more on the I'm a manager, and I tend to be more on the technical side of management. I hope I'm successful. The one thing I will tell that I kind of caution people who want to be more of a technical manager and be a technical contributor is the one thing I tell people is I've always had the mentality as a manager. It's like I code and I'm still technically involved because I enjoy helping out with the architecture. I enjoy helping people. I want to know enough that I can help my team design their features, make sure it's fitting into our product the right way, and that we're building the right things. And I still code because it's what keeps me sane. I think I would lose my mind if I didn't check in code every now and then. But if you look at what I code as a manager, I'm always helping out on the margins. It's like, hey, no one wants to go fix the test infrastructure. I'll go fix it. Like that'll be my contribution.
Jared, I will tell you, Jared takes the crap jobs.
Yeah.
He does. So everybody else can shine.
Exactly, because it's like I feel like I'm removing roadblocks for my team to do the big things that they want to do to be successful. And so I often, like, there's still like a couple of areas of the compiler I own, and I often tell people, like, if anyone wants to take that away from me, like, feel free. I'll gladly cede this feature area to someone, and then I'll just go pick up some other crap job. So I do want to encourage people, like, if you're going to technical manager, still realize, like, your job is to make your people successful, and think about your technical role in that way. It's like you shouldn't be building the big shiny feature. You should be doing the things that help your team members build the big shiny feature.
Right. Exactly.
I think to become a technical manager, you have to let go of one thing: is the code you're looking at good, or is it the code you're looking at bad, or is it just not written the way you would have written it?
Right.
There's a big difference between the two, and really getting your head around that, I think, is important.
I agree with you, and I also think it applies to individual contributors. Like in a team where you're like code reviewing, that is important, right? To not just be like, no, make it like mine.
Yeah, that's true. I just want to say one thing about this really quick, and that is the best project managers I've known have a technical background, and the worst ones don't. And that's just my experience. But I think to answer Ganesh's question is I think you have to be good at both, right? If you're really going to be successful and really put out, a product or a service that the users love and will pay for, I think you have to be both. That's my opinion.
As long as you're not treating your staff as your assistants.
Yeah.
I'm going to
micromanaging
code the center.
them. Yeah. Micromanagement will destroy. I recently worked on a team at Verizon Wireless that the whole team was destroyed because of micromanagement. And oh, you're welcome, Ganesh. The next thing I want to talk about really quick before we run out of time, I'm not used to doing an hour and a half show, is we've talked about this already, but how about soft skills? What are the good soft skills people besides communication need to know to last a long time in this career?
Conflict resolution and being willing to have conflict. Those are the two pieces. The second one I think is more important.
Yeah.
Is Pollyanna, or I'm just going to stay in my safe place, doesn't help at all. Because if you can't voice the things that you're unhappy about, you're going to stay unhappy and your performance is going to go down, and it'll be noticed.
Yes.
You're not causing trouble just because you're voicing your opinion.
Right.
Even just the language that you use sometimes you don't realize how big a difference it can make.
Yes.
I don't know that I've ever said in when you get into a conflict, I disagree with you. What I say is I challenge that.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is a much softer way to be able to get into a discussion of what you don't agree on.
Yes.
I would say also understanding your position in power in those situations, right? With those softer skills, right? Being cognizant of what your words mean coming from you sometimes is a huge deal, right? As Billy says, like that turn of phrase, it seems like, oh, come on. No, it's real, right? Coming from Billy Hollis, I'd be terrified. He's like, I disagree with everything Dustin said. I'd be like, I'm out. I quit, right?
Yep.
But
It's over.
He told us that earlier.
Funny,
I don't know.
But really, it's true, and it's got to be that you recognize, like, what your opinion, whether your opinion matters, how much it matters, and being able to then kind of shape how you communicate around that.
Yeah.
And not getting entrenched.
Yes.
Yeah. And never communicate just to make yourself look smarter, right? That never works, and it will just alienate people in an instant if you do that.
Right? Yeah, I think it was Richard Campbell that I first heard say this. He said, "You've already got the job. Stop trying to convince me to hire you." Like that happens a lot. In that, a lot of us have fragile egos, and and knowing that people are in different places. And at the end of that, the best advice I ever got was being willing to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a huge power in just, let's figure it out. Or can you help me figure this out? You don't have to remember every syntax in your head. You don't have to. And it very much feels like you have to, because you see people present or do videos and they have everything at the tip of their fingers because they've practiced it 34 times and they've got a script in their head, right? That is not the real world.
No. Yeah, true.
Dealing with conflict has been one of hardest things for me to learn in my career. Because I have literally quit jobs and, or found other jobs to avoid having conflict in the jobs that I was at the time. And so I think one of the most amazing tools that I have learned in the last 12, 15 years is a perspective on conflict. And that is someone taught me that one way to look at conflict is that you and that other person or team or whoever that other side of the story is that you're having conflict with, one, they're not your enemy. They're, they deserve respect. They're part of your, if you're part of the same company, you're on the same team, right? You should all you're working toward the same thing. But number two is think of that problem as something that you and that other person or other team can solve together. To disconnect the problem from that person, right? So that it's not you and them going head to head and fighting. It's, hey, how can we, here's the problem objectively. How can you and I work together to make this situation better? And I think that perspective really, really helped me to embrace the power of, good conflict resolution so that, we could all be better for it in the end.
Yeah. That's the conflict resolution is difficult. It's always been difficult for me. It will always be difficult. I try really hard to be better at it, but like I think a lot of you have already said, is I try to, my way of dealing with it. You said this, David. My way of dealing with it is avoiding it, right? And that doesn't deal with it, right? And so I've learned that the hard way, throughout my life, and I'm trying constantly to be better at that. But that is definitely, because you're not going to go to any job and have everybody go, yeah, we all like each other, we all have the same ideas. It doesn't work that way, right? And so,
and also, as Shawn pointed out earlier, with kindness, with empathy,
yeah,
having, giving other folks the benefit of the doubt that maybe you don't have the whole story. Maybe you've
Right.
made up some stories in your head on why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. And, being open and willing to work out that those conflicts can be a huge win for everyone.
yes.
I'll add something else in this mix, is that when conflict has gone too far, being quick to apologize.
Yes.
Right. If you've taken it too far, if it got the better of you, this has happened to Jared and I, but like, nice grimace, Jared's nice. But it be the one to like say, look, I'm sorry, I totally messed that up. This is off on the wrong foot, and reboot. Right. As you guys are talking about conflict avoidance and those kinds of things, and like that being kind of a first inclination. My inclination is just get mad, and I've got to deal with that, right? I'm ADHD, and so my first inclination is get emotionally dysregulated and get frustrated. So knowing yourself, how you might respond to something, so that you can keep the things that are going to, make the conflict resolution harder in the end in check.
Yeah.
I think there's two things about that I think are important. One is to be able to separate the difference between being right and being heard.
Mm. Yeah.
If I'm heard and the decision is not in my favor, if you want to use those pejorative words, I'm still on the bus. I'm still on the team. Like that none of that really solves that. In these skills we're talking about, conflict resolution and communication, they happen to help you in your personal life. Like, I would not have the relationship I have with my wife if I was still that 25-year-old that wanted to hide and avoid conflict at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
One thing a technique I've definitely found, especially like mid to later in my career, is particularly like when I'm having conflict, often if you're in a corporate environment, it's going to be a repeat conflict with certain people, is finding ways to have a non-technical conversation with that person. Yes. And get to see them as a human. Like, for instance, like this Star Destroyer back here, that was put there originally just because I had no other place to put it. But it turns out it has been an amazing like conversation icebreaker with people. People are like, oh, you did that Lego, or what is that? How big is that? And the number of meetings I've had, which have started or ended with someone asking about that Lego or something like that. And we can just have a conversation as just two people. And we're just like, hey, like this. And then they start telling me about like, oh yeah, like I've done this, or like I build this type of thing on the side. And once you start communicating with someone, like just as a human, and like you've gotten all the technical stuff aside, I mean, it creates a bit of a base relationship where you're just going to want to like have more empathy for that other person when you start having that technical conversation later on. And I try to stress to people, it's like find ways to build non-technical relationships with these people that you're having problems with. And I think you'll find the technical problems, they start getting softer because you start to see each other as people and no longer as opposing people on like a problem.
Yeah, you've all reminded me of a story basically of doing, getting to know, like you just said, getting to know people outside of the work environment, right? And so I will say that I'm not a big person that likes going to Christmas office parties and things like that. Not really, but I have found that that's really where I get to know people, right? And you get to know people and go, hey, they're not really that way in real life. So maybe I have more common ground with them, right? Or, when I was working at a .com, back in the internet bubble days, I hosted 2 team building events that me and one other person did for our entire development team. And I still remember like the first one, the next Monday after we came back from the first one, it just, the mood of the entire team was different, right? Just because we went and spent the afternoon bowling and drinking beer and playing silly games to win prizes, right? That's all we did. And it was such a big help for our team.
Yeah, make friends, I think, is a good way to say, right? Like just don't be afraid to make friends. It's like, and it doesn't have to be on that, like, you know, very specific, like, hey, we're all going to go have beers together. That's not for everybody, right? I have a mentee who I love interacting with her outside of work. That's all through Goodreads and Letterboxd and other things that she's really into. And I'm like, cool, you know, I'll sign up. Let's do this. And it's great fun. And those are things we can talk about the next time we meet. If there's not a technical thing, we can just talk about like the stuff we're into, and it's cool.
And being able to do that in your community, whether that's you going to a conference or going to a meetup or a user group, have some human conversations. Not everything has to be technical.
Right. I've always sought out non-technical discussions at conferences, always, right? Because my brain can only take so much technical in the day, and so I want to talk about other stuff.
Exactly. You're at a technical show. Like, why do I want to talk about this? You know, that's what I'm doing all day.
I want to know what you're excited about. And if it's service bus, that's fine. But I don't think it's service bus.
No. Well, we're getting close to the end already. I was just thinking we need to do a part 2 or something maybe, but someday. But because I still think we have so much to talk about, but we're getting close to the hour and a half. So I kind of want to, hello from Ledger from Africa. Thanks for joining. I don't remember seeing anybody from Africa before, so I'm glad you're here. So I wanted to, like I said at the beginning of the show, I wanted to end up with your final thoughts and or your number one tip, which I've saved my number one to the end, on, you know, what advice you would give to help people have a long, successful career in tech. So with that said, Billy, do you want to go first?
I guess I can. And my number one tip is number one because of the small investment and the huge return that comes from it. And that is spend some structured time on your listening skills. Because it's key to everything you do in this industry. It's key to everything you do in life. And human beings in general are just not very good at listening. and you know that because you've seen it. You've seen when you're talking to someone and they get that glazed look on their face where they're pretending to listen, but they're not really listening anymore. Yeah. Well, if you can see it in other people, they can see it in you too. And it turns out that the typical amount of time for active listening is about 15 to 20 seconds before people's minds wander. There's research based on that. And you can get that up to a couple of minutes. And there are exercises and such that you can use to do it. There are various places you can find to do these. But I recommend there's a chapter in a book called The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox Cabane, who is very, very well known in helping people increase their presence. She works with very high-end executives. Well, the advice in that book is good for just about anybody in any career, but the chapter on listening is the one that I recommend people go to first. And you won't spend that much time on it, a couple of hours maybe, and then some of the exercises that you focus on as you go through the next week or two of your life. But if you ingrain those habits, then the effects upon your career are likely to be bigger than you think and longer term than you would imagine.
Yes. That's so true.
I'm sorry, Billy, what were you saying?
I checked out after 20 seconds.
Thanks for throwing yourself on
Perfect, Shawn.
there. I was not going to do that joke. But I'm glad it was said.
I have no shame.
David, you're next.
Yeah, well, I kind of let the cat out of the bag. I already said earlier that my
Yeah.
number one tip was getting involved in the community, and developing relationships, both as was pointed out, up and down, because you never know where one of those connections can lead in the future, and what kind of opportunities that can open up for you down the road. I will plug one book that has been kind of eye-opening to me in the last 5 years, and that is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And there's a kind of a perspective in that book that talks about either being above the line or below the line. So in a nutshell, above the line is you're open, you're creative, you're willing to receive criticism, willing to give criticism, and it's all like you have genuine care for the people that are around you, and you're working unselfishly, and there's all kinds of facets to this, and I would highly recommend checking out that book and related material.
Cool. Jared?
Yeah, I'd say I think most people get into tech because you have some particular technology that you're passionate about. You have a certain level of curiosity, and you've demonstrated a certain level of skill to get in there. And I do think you need to definitely keep up. You have to maintain the learning. Like, that's one thing you do have to figure out, is how do I maintain the learning? But I'll say, like, the people who have been in tech for a long time, like every single one of them I talk to, it's like, why are you still on the team you are on? What do you get about this? They won't talk about the tech. They talk about the people. They're like, hey, like, I've met my friends through this job. Like, Dustin and I have worked together for 16 years now, and he is one of my good friends. And people ask me, it's like, why do you stay on the team? And I'm like, man, look, like, I've been working with these people for this many years, and I like them. They're my friends. Like, we hang out. We've developed outside work relationships. And I do want to emphasize to people, it's like, the reason you will get much more enjoyment out of this job, you will feel fulfilled, and you will have better staying power if you view your job as a way to build relationships, not just get some code written.
Yeah, that's so important, that I've learned too, is that. And I've stayed on teams longer than I wanted to because of that, right? And because to me it's so hard to find a good team and a good group of people you really get along with. That's the hardest thing for me, has been able to find that in a company, right? So I'll stay longer than I really should sometimes. Yeah. Dustin?
Yeah, I knew I was coming up next, so I'll just comment on that. But I've got a tip as well. But when I'm gigging a lot, doing music, and I know this applies to some of you guys, I've always said there's an inverse relationship between how much I need to be paid and how much fun the gig is, right? And if it's going to be fun, fine, whatever,
Yeah.
I'll do it. It's very simple. My number one tip is to take care of your health, physical and mental. And for engineers, that might be different, right? There's, we're sedentary, we're sitting on our butts all day, writing code. But also vision. How many people here have experienced hand injuries? It's kind of terrifying, right? Yeah, I know, David, you've got one right now. I mean, it's like, okay, but this is what I do. And so don't ignore hand pain. Don't ignore eye strain. Go deal with those things. And then on the mental side, take it seriously. The stress is real. And just even knowing enough about yourself and how you react to situations, how you learn, what are the things that work for you, that's huge. So that would be my biggest tip, is to just know yourself well, physically and mentally.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I've shared my story that I've, in the last 12 years or 13 years now, I've lost 140 pounds. And, and that one thing I did was just really made a huge change for me, so yeah, staying healthy is something we don't think a lot about, right? Because like you said, we eat bad food, we drink too much, but you've got to be healthy if you're going to stick around this long, right? Shawn?
So mine is a little different, I think, and that is be unafraid to take risks. There was a point in my career I was sort of the superstar at a 100-man company, and I would work, way too many hours to maintain that. Like, well, Shawn will come save us, and that is it's a laudable position to be in. But when I got an opportunity to work with this name goes back a little while, the developmental guys on some things, Chris Sells, Dunbox, and stuff.
Right.
I was very close to not taking that because I was afraid to not feel like I was the smartest one in the room, and realized that taking that risk and not being the smartest one in the room will help you understand how people work together. When one of my heroes said, "I don't know," for the first time, I was like, but if you don't know, how does anybody know? Because we're all just people, and you'll gain a benefit from taking that risk. If you're worried about it because you don't need it because you're smart and all this other stuff, really look at that as, are you arrogant or insecure? And they can look like the same thing to a lot of us, especially earlier in our career.
Yeah, that's one I didn't think about until right now. But I'm going to put all these. I'm going to make notes of this. I'm going to put it all on the blog post for this. But my number one tip, and like I said, I'll publish it on my blog tomorrow, and someone else, I think maybe David has already mentioned this, and that is financial planning. We talked about this a little bit, when we were talking about ageism, right? And this part of my career would be a lot better if I did financial planning in the beginning, right? As far as my background goes, when I went to school, there's no classes in high school or anything for this, right? I'm not sure if there still is, to tell you the truth, right? My parents never taught me about financial planning, and therefore I haven't taught my kids. And so I feel really bad about that, in a way. And, the pain I've been experiencing the last year would not be near as bad and cause near as many mental problems with me if I had the financial nest egg, that I didn't have to worry about gaps in my career, and a long time ago, before I went consulting, one of my consulting friends said, Dave, before you go consulting, you need to have at least 3 months of operating capital in the bank, right? And at that time, I still was supporting my kids, and I was going, oh man, I don't know how I can ever do that. But after going through, not having a contract for a while or being laid off or whatever, I'm revising that to at least 6 months to a year, right? And 3 months is not good enough, right? Because it takes so long to find a new position these days. Even if you are new in this job, it takes a long time these days because just the sheer number of people that are applying to jobs as opposed to when we all started out, right? And so my thing, and like I said, it's going to be on my blog, is as soon as you become a software engineer, because most software engineers all start out this varies on what country you're in, but we all start out pretty dang good pay. In America, we are way above average, just starting pay in America for software engineers, right? And so, I'm a parent, just like many of you on this show. And being young and being a parent and trying to save money is near impossible, right? And so, but you have to find a way to save money, start, invest. Don't take investment advice from me, but you need to start investing. And the number one thing I did, which wasn't really my idea, it was my accountant's idea. The number one thing I did right was buy this home, right? That was the only thing I did as far as financial planning correctly, because this home, especially because where I bought it, I'm a mile from the beach, I'm next to 2 major highways. I knew this home was not going to go down, and it never did, even during the 2008 downturn. And so the one thing I did right was buy property. So my quick advice is save money and buy as much property as you can.
David's advice is real estate. It's all
Real
about
estate.
real
Yeah.
estate.
And don't have kids. It's much easier to plan financially if you don't have kids.
You'll save a lot of money not having kids.
Yeah, if financial planning is your thing, if learning and combating ageism is your thing, having kids can help.
Yeah.
If you
So-
enjoy doing conflict resolution, with smaller versions of yourself.
With somebody else who's no good at it.
Yeah. Try doing conflict resolution with a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Or a 14-year-old.
Hey, my kids are in their 30s and I still have problems, right? So, actually, my son's going to be here tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't seen him in 2 years in person. So, anyway, so we're a little bit over time. Sorry, Simon. And I want to thank all of you for being on this show. I wish this was longer because I think we all have a lot to give, but we all have limited time and we all want to get to the weekend. But I want to thank all of you for not only coming on the show, but giving all of you great advice. And for everybody watching, I hope this will help you have a long, successful career, rewarding career with less stress, and to be happy. Right? We all want. I've always believed that you need to find a job you're happy with, and for the most part, software engineering has been really great for me. But you need to find that and stick with it. So thanks everybody for being on the show. I've got a couple more slides. I'll hang out afterwards if any of you want to chat really quick. But if you don't chat after the show, I hope you all have a great weekend and have fun with your family. And thanks again so much for being on this special panel show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. Wow, that was Simon. You awake? Hey, he's waking up. It's late in India. Simon. Maybe Simon went to the bathroom. I'm trying to get him to switch slides. There we go. Well, to finish off this special panel show, I want to say again, I hope you will help me help the kids from the slums in Delhi, India, by going to the voiceofslum.org and donating whatever you can, whatever that is, because this is a great organization that I've not only visited but have been helping out ever since my first visit. And these are pictures and videos from the last time I was there. And, Dave and Chandy, who do a wonderful job, getting kids out of the slums, feeding them, clothing them, teaching them, helping them with learning career and things like that. So if you can give $5, they would really, really love that. So after the show, or right now, because the show is pretty much over, please go to thevoiceofslum.org and please donate whatever you can and keep donating because it's a great, great organization. All right, with that said, as always, I can't donate blood right now, but you can. So, America and I'm sure other countries are dealing with a huge shortage for some reason right now with blood donations. So please, please, please go donate blood this weekend. It only takes 30 minutes of your time, and that one donation can help up to 3 people. And like I always say, you need to bank up that karma or whatever, because, someday you might need that blood, and you're going to want people like yourself and myself to be regular blood donators. So I hope you will go do that. And with that, thanks so much for being on this special panel show. I hope you all got something out of it. Thanks for watching the 4th season of Rockin the Code World. And as always, thanks to my awesome producer, Simon, who's always in the background doing an excellent job. I couldn't do the show without him. So thank you so much, Simon. And I'll see you all next time.